Look at that. We are live. We are live with today's 220-1102 Core 2 A Plus study group. We are just getting things started here. We're checking on cameras. This is our pre-show, our 10-minute pre-show. We start at the top of the hour. You can see the clock is right there. And I am just making sure that things are working the way they are supposed to be working, which I can't say is always what we find, but most of the time it's in pretty good shape. Sometimes we have to dance around a little bit, but I think we're good. We can see recordings going down here on the bottom right. There's my Cylons. We've got our on air. We're looking at good bandwidth, approximately 5 megabits per second is what I am sending to YouTube. You are obviously getting something else. YouTube is rearranging and updating that video for your format and sending that down to you. So I send them one stream and then they send out hundreds of streams. So thank you, YouTube. That is phenomenal. I'm glad I don't have to do that. And then our cache right here, if you've always seen that number, 3% is where the cache is. So there is a 3% of what I am doing here is cached up and is being sent out across the network in steady beats. You can almost see I know it's hard to see where you are, but you can kind of see. Did I even do this as an input? I don't think I did. Oh, I did. So you're going to see a cascade effect when I do this, but will allow you to see this 3% at the very bottom. You see how it has the little dips in it? So you can kind of see it working a little bit. So that's what that's coming from. I'm glad I did that. We are in great shape. Oh, you want to join the Discord? It's professormesser.com/Discord. Thank you for asking. And we have graphics look good there. We also have on my screen, you can kind of see it there. I guess I could bring it up so you could actually see it. Is prompt asking you to determine where you are joining from. We can actually see with our virtual pins and our virtual map where you might be located in the world. And you're welcome to plug that in so that others can see the same thing by visiting the link on your screen, professormesser.com/QA, Quebec Alpha. Quebec Alpha. I don't know if the ham radio people would understand. Quebec Alpha. What are you saying? It's Quebec. Say it properly. Nobody knows what to say or how to say it anymore. How to say anything. Oh, that's not true. We have, let's go back to this view. Graphics look good there. Numbers look good here. Super good. This is all working just fine. This is always, some folks are even mentioning in the chat room. There's a lot of stuff in here. There's really not. There's much less than there used to be, quite honestly. It's just that a lot of this that you're seeing was in a different room completely. The streaming server was in our data center, which was a closet that's in the other side of the room. That's no longer there. Now it's in the rack. You can't really see the rack very well. Let me get rid of my lower third here real quick. There's a bunch of equipment down here that apparently needs to be dusted. And you can't see it because it's not down far enough, but this is a 19-inch rack on the left side and the right side. So here's the left side rack. Network connections are coming in there. Not bad. I need to straighten up the cables just a little bit. My video mixer is there. That's the colorful one. I used to use this microphone amp, or the headphone amp rather, and I no longer use the headphone amp anymore because I got a new mixer, and I don't even use that old mixer that's down there, the old Core 16. Sadly, which is an amazing mixer, but I don't use it anymore. I took a mixer that, costs a lot of money and got one that costs $500 that does so much more. This is how technology works, isn't it? So now I have new mixers. I've got new streamlined video switcher. So now much smaller on the desk. The desk has more room. I guess I should get some of these things out of the way. That's a keypad I use, a specialized keypad I use for the video editing. This is made by, it's a Shuttle Pro. Contour makes this. Contour makes the Shuttle Pro. It's a fantastic controller for doing editing. It used to have, you can almost see there's two light buttons. You can't actually see anything. Nope. Nope. How about that? How about this, right? Why have I got the mix turned on? Turn the mix, turn the background off, turn this off, go to here, get rid of that transition. There's always a button. So this is what I use when I'm editing video, is the Shuttle Pro from Contour. Contour Design, I think, is their name. And you can see there's two glossy buttons. You're supposed to put like little pieces of paper under here, and it's covered with this glossy button. But I've used these so much that the glossy buttons don't even fit anymore. It's all software programmable. It's really a super nice controller for doing editing, but it does get in the way. And so I get it out of the way so I don't accidentally hit it during the live stream. We got about 4 minutes to go. 4 minutes to go. We'll get things started. This is not the show. This is the boring part. Have I tried a Go XLR? Not familiar. See, now we're going to have to, I have to have a look at it. Go XLR. Go XLR. Oh, it's yet another control from the folks at TC Helicon, which, it's tough to find a domain name these days. That's the problem. So there's your Go XLR. Whoa, way too many buttons, way too much going on there. Everything needs to be in a much smaller place. If you saw me edit, I type on that Shuttle Pro like it's a very fast keyboard. I'm just sitting there, click, 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 click. It's really, really fast. So you really don't have a lot of time. There's no wheels spinning. There's no sync it up on. No, it's very fast. Click, 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 click. We try to get through it. Well, and hopefully not cause your screensaver to pop up there. So we're good. For those of you wondering, I know some of you have seen the announcement from CompTIA that says, hey, there's a new A+ coming in the spring, whenever that is. They haven't given an actual date yet. And because of that, you can completely ignore it. Without a date, we have no idea when this will show up. But even if it shows up tomorrow, you've got 6 months before the current exam goes away. So the answer is, don't worry about exams that don't exist. Worry about the exam that exists. That's the one you need to focus on. It's going to be here till the end of the year. You have plenty of time to study for it and pass it. So that's not an issue. Don't worry about the things that haven't been released that aren't real. It's not real. I mean, it will be eventually, but at the moment, it's not real. Just let that one deal with it itself. You're going to be certified well before anybody else is on a new exam. You'll be fine. You'll be just good. What would I recommend for performance-based questions? What you can do is know your exam objectives. That's it. Who cares how they ask the question? If you know the material, you can answer it however they ask it. They'll ask you a fill in the blank. You know the answer. They can ask you a matching question. You know the answer. So don't worry so much about how they're going to ask me a question in a way that I'm not used to. That's like asking, how do I answer when somebody says, how are you doing versus how's your day going? Like, you should be able to figure that out. Who cares how they ask the question? You know the answer. So don't worry so much about finding the right format. I need to understand. Well, there's a whole world of possibilities. There's an infinitesimal number, just an enormous grouping of possible ways they can ask a question of you. Are you asking us to come up with every possible way that a question could be asked? I realize you're not. Of course you're not. But don't worry about trying to find an exact representation of how this question will be presented to me on the exam. Why bother? Just know the content. Then they could ask it however they want it. Then it doesn't matter how they present it to you. They could fill in the blank, no problem. Matching, got it. Drag and drop, fine. Whatever. I already know the content. So that's my recommendation. We're coming up on the top of the hour, which means we get to do a study group. Study group. I should probably prep. Look at me. There we go. That's what we're going to do right there. Ordered a Logitech vertical mouse. How was my experience with mine? I don't have one. I do not have a vertical mouse. I don't like vertical mice. Do not like them. If you want to see what I'm running, you can look at the professormesser.com/studio, and we'll figure that out. Top of the hour. Look at that. Let's go to our keynote. Let's get a green light. Green light. Thank you, keynote, for telling me about AI. I don't need AI. I already made the presentation. We're good. Okay, now it's time for a live stream, everybody. I think check. Do one last check. I think we're ready to go. Why don't we do that? Time for a live stream. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the February 2025 Professor Messer 2201102. That is the Core 2 A+ study group. Thank you so much for joining us today. I have in this first hour a number of brand new study questions that we're going to go through. We'll see how much you know about these different questions that I'm going to ask that come directly from the CompTIA exam objectives. And then I have for you in the second hour a chance to actually ask questions of me. And in fact, you can do that right now by visiting the link that we have right here. Right here at the bottom of the screen, you can see the professormesser.com/QA link. That is the link that will give you information on not only how to answer questions that we will do today, but also at the top is a tab where you can submit questions for me in the second hour. It's a win-win. Or you can visit directly if you want to type it in, professormesser.com/QA, or use the QR code right there, and it will get you exactly where you need to be. This way, you don't need to know any session IDs. You don't have to type in any numbers. You just type in professormesser.com/QA, and you indeed are done. Now, if you would like to see if that works, let's try it out, shall we? We'll try it out by visiting the link that you see I'm about to put on the screen here. We'll be able to make this available to you. I have for you a question that's from last month. That's why we call it a rewind question. We're going to see if we first remember the answer to the question, and then I'd like to see if you're able to get in and answer the question using that link I just provided to you. So the question asks, a company would like to use a backup method that will restore with a single backup set. Which of the following would meet this requirement? And the way that you answer that is to follow the link on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA, and you will be able to answer this question. See if you know what it is. There are a number of options available. I'll remind everyone, if you haven't been on one of our study groups today, we have a standing rule that says you can't answer these in the chat room. Please do not answer these questions in the chat room. Please don't put any hints in the chat room. You go to the link on your screen to be able to answer these questions. This one asks, a company would like to use a backup method that will restore with a single backup set. Which of the following would meet this requirement? Is it a snapshot, differential backup, full backup, FTP, or incremental backup? Again, if you think you know the answer, you go to that link, professormesser.com/QA, and lock in your question. As always, please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. Let's now, we're going to come back to this question, by the way, in just a moment. It's a good question. We're going to see how well we do with it. Let's, though, first remind you and thank you for being here. We really cannot do these live streams without your participation. I guess we could, but it would be awfully boring if I was here by myself answering questions. So thankfully you are here, and we thank you for that. Don't forget that when we are not here, our entire library, our entire catalog of training is available on our YouTube channel. Every minute of every training video is out there. We hold nothing back. There's nothing behind a paywall. There's nothing you have to register for. There's no secret codes you have to know. It's all on YouTube. ProfessorMesser.com/YouTube. We also have daily A+ pop quiz questions we put on the service formerly known as Twitter. You can find that at ProfessorMesser.com/Twitter or ProfessorMesser.com/X. You can also find it on Instagram if you like your questions with a pretty picture. Over at ProfessorMesser.com/Instagram. And we do have quite a bit of other places. If you just want to find us on your favorite social media, just type in ProfessorMesser.com/ the name of that site, /LinkedIn, /Facebook, /whatever. And if we're there, you'll find us. If we're not there, you won't find us. And maybe you should tell me to go over there. Why aren't you there already, Professor Messer? And I'll be glad to do that. Oh, sometime during this first hour, I will give you instructions on how you can earn a continuing education unit credit. Not now, later on. You have to listen in, and I will give you instructions and information on how you can receive an email from me that has been digitally signed with a digital certification of you attending this 1 hour webinar category CEU. Now, if you don't know what a CEU is, it stands for Continuing Education Unit Credit. But if you didn't know that, then you probably don't need this. This is if you're renewing your certification. If you're still working on your certification, you'll be able to do this later on. Don't worry about it right now. For those of you that are here that are already certified, or you need some type of continuing education credit for this or anything else that you're doing, more than happy to give it to you. Just listen in sometime during this first hour. Today, we're going to talk about questions that come from the 220-1101 or the 220-1102. Those are the current and only A+ exams available for you to take. These are exams that were released on April the 20th of 2022, and we estimate the retirement for this is going to be somewhere around the October-November timeframe, but CompTIA has not provided any specifics yet, so we don't know the exact dates yet. That's a guess that I have based on the release date. That may not even necessarily be close to it. It might be September, October, November. Could be December. I don't know. But I think that's a pretty good bet. The October-November timeframe, I think, is pretty good. Today, we are going to be talking specifically about questions and topics associated with the 220-1102. That 220-1102 is a 90-minute exam, and you need to earn a 700 on a scale from 100 to 900. So that's an odd grading scale, but that's the way they do it. And so we need to make sure that we know enough of this content. So at the end of the exam, we hit the submit button and we get a 700 or better. Once you pass your Core 1 and your Core 2 exam, which is the 1101 and 1102 exam, you are A+ certified. And you are A+ certified for 3 years after passing that second exam. So although I talked a lot up here about exam retirements and release dates and all of these other things, once you become certified, none of that matters to you. You're out of the exam taking phase. You're now in the certification owner phase, which has a completely different set of expirations, and they're based on that 3-year clock once you become certified. As far as topics are concerned, here's what we're going to talk about today. The 220-1102 exam, the Core 2 exam. We will be discussing operating systems, security, software troubleshooting, and operational procedures. So there's quite a bit to talk about along those 4 domains, and we will go through each one of those domains with Q&A today. Once we are done here, the video replay of this will be immediately available on YouTube. But I also create an audio-only replay that I distribute through a podcast distribution. So if you have a favorite podcast listening program, you can simply add us to your application or your app. You can, of course, go to a streaming service and listen. So if you're on Spotify, you can go to Spotify and search for ProfessorMesser.com, and you'll find all of our podcasts there for A+ Core 1, A+ Core 2, Network Plus, and Security Plus. So I guess technically we have 4 podcasts all in one. There are 4 separate distributions. So make sure if you're interested in more than one that you subscribe to more than one of those podcasts. Let's see just how much of me you can stand at one time with your 4 podcasts. Also, sometime in the next day or so, you'll notice that the YouTube video description suddenly comes to life with a series of timestamps that tell you exactly what we did today and when we did it. I would like to tell you that I've already predefined what the timestamps are, and they're already written and ready to go, but that's not technically possible. I guess once we figure out time travel, that will work. In the meantime, I have something better than time travel. I have my marketing manager, Lori. She's watching this replay. Hi, Lori. Everybody say hi to Lori. She is going through and making sure that all of these timestamps are here so that you are able to find exactly what you were looking for and help speed your learning and studying process along just a little bit better. And of course, she's got the chat up. She's watching the chat replay. So give her a wave, tell her hello. Let her know that we appreciate what she's doing, and I know that I do. Thank you so much. Let's also talk about what I'm doing after this. Enough about other people. Let's talk about me for a moment. The Discord server that I've created is so much more than just me. It is thousands of you that are working together to earn your A+, Network Plus, or Security Plus certification, and in some cases, even other certifications on our Discord. It is a fabulous community of people that transcends anything that I ever thought it could be. We'd love to have you join us. It's at professormesser.com/Discord. That is a great place to go. It'll take you right to the Discord server where everyone is there. So once we're done here, that's where I usually hang out as well. professormesser.com/Discord. Eventually, you will need to take your exam. That is one of the necessary things you must do if you're planning to become certified. And of course, if you're in the US or Canada, you could go to the CompTIA website and pay full price for your exam. But why would you do that when I already have discounted vouchers available on my site? You don't need a special code. You don't need a coupon. You don't need to do anything. They're just already discounted off of the normal retail price. You can find that at professormesser.com/vouchers. And if you purchase it there, I'll even give you a little bit more. I've written a set of tips and tricks that I've accumulated through the years and put them all into a single book that I call my Exam Hacks ebook. This can give you some tips and tricks, not just for the study process, but I give you some strategies you can use during the exam itself. So if you're looking to maybe get a couple of extra points in the heat of the battle, there's plenty of tips there that might be able to help you out. professormesser.com/vouchers will get you there. And for those of you that have purchased your voucher there, or you're planning to purchase your voucher there, thank you very much. It really does help with everything that we do here behind the scenes. It has a huge impact, so thank you. Let's now go back to that question I asked earlier. It was, a company would like to use a backup method that will restore with a single backup set. Which of the following would meet this requirement? Is it a snapshot, a differential backup, a full backup, an FTP, or an incremental backup? Well, let's stop our poll and see how we did with this one. You can see that 71% of you say full backup gives you a single backup set. 16% said a snapshot, and then we dropped down to single digits immediately. Differential backup got 6%, incremental backup got 4%, and 3% for FTP. 71% is a pretty strong number for a full backup. So let's see what backup type we might use to do something like that. A full backup set is one where you are backing up everything at one time. You're getting all of the data on that system. And because you're doing that, it takes quite a bit of time to do. So it has a high backup time. But when you need to restore it, it has a low restore time. Why is that? Because you have one single backup set and you're able to perform the restoration very quickly. This makes it a lot easier. You don't have to keep swapping things out or finding the second or third or fourth backup set and do them in a particular order. With a full backup, you don't worry about any of that. With a differential backup, you only have 2 backup sets, or a maximum of 2 backup sets, which is a little bit better, but that wasn't the question we asked. And an incremental backup has multiple backup sets. That's the one where you have to have the full backup and then every incremental backup that has occurred since that last full backup. So that can be a little bit annoying. There's also a synthetic backup. You'll notice that wasn't one of the choices, because when you create a synthetic backup from all of these other backups you've created, you've effectively squeezed together a differential backup, or you've squeezed together a full backup to create a brand new full backup without having to take a full backup. That's why we call it synthetic, and is one that does have a single backup set. So had I put synthetic on that list, you would have had to choose between full and synthetic, and that wouldn't have made any sense, which is why it's not there. We would have had to put one or the other, I guess, into that mix. But that is why full backup is the right solution. That's why differential and incremental are not the correct solution. FTP is a file transfer protocol. It's not a backup method. It doesn't create a backup set. So that's not something you would use. And a snapshot is very similar to an incremental backup. If you ever look at the snapshot, when you take a snapshot initially, you can think of that as your full backup. And then each subsequent snapshot would be an increment of that. Well, that's not what we're trying to do either. It's not really a backup set, although it is very easy to restore using a snapshot than any of these other methods. Very, very fast and very, very easy. And if you're not using snapshots for your virtual machines, you should be doing that already. It's such a simple way to back up your system and very, very quickly restore to where that was. But in this case, the only option that makes any sense is the full backup, and 71% of you got that one absolutely correct. Well done. Well, I think we did a pretty good job with our rewind question. It looks like you're able to get in and answer the questions properly. So now let's do something a little bit different, because multiple choice questions are things that most of us are very familiar with. But if you've never taken one of these CompTIA exams before, you may not realize that the first handful of questions you get on your exam, they're not multiple choice. Not at all. There's something completely different. They are a performance-based question, a PBQ. The PBQs are designed to ask you about information that you've already learned from the exam objectives, but just ask you in a different way than a multiple choice question. So this could be a fill in the blank. It could be putting you at a command prompt and asking you to perform a function. It may be a mix and match type of question. It might be a pull down menu. There's many different ways to ask you about this information from the exam objectives. So you should be ready for that. You'll get a handful of these at the beginning of your exam. So I think that's another important way to start thinking about how you would approach this type of exam. So I have for you, as I do with every new question on these study groups, I have for you this question that asks, match the best choice of scripting language to the description. I even made this one a little bit easier for you, because this one is one that has 5 different scripting languages and 5 different descriptions. It's a 1-to-1 match. Normally, I don't make it this easy for you. So this one, I think we should do pretty well. For those of you listening on the podcast, let me go through these scripting languages. I have a .py, .vbs, a .bat, a .sh, and a .ps1. Those are what you have available to choose from. The different descriptions are: modify a Microsoft Outlook form based on user input. Which one would you use? A .py, a .vbs, a .bat, a .sh, or a .ps1? The second one on the list is automatically restart a Windows web service each hour. The third is rotate the log files on Windows, Mac OS, and Linux. Someone sent me an email and said I need to go back the old way. I said I say files. I'm trying to say files differently, and it's very difficult. I'm in the South. It's files. Rotate the log files on Windows, Mac OS, and Linux. D is update the web server certificate on a Linux server. And the last one is copy a Windows document folder to all remote sites each day. This is the 5 different descriptions and 5 different scripting languages. It's a 1-to-1 match. If you want to submit your answers, please note answers in the chat room. You want to go to professormesser.com/QA. Those in the chat room that are saying, well, sort of in the South, sort of the Central Florida area, so more Kissimmee, I guess. We could say that. They've still got the rodeo down there. Well, they still do the hooping and hollering down there at the rodeo. So they do like to have a lot of fun. That's all good. That's where I grew up. I grew up in North Florida. So I grew up in the woods, in the sticks. So it just doesn't sound like I do. I guess occasionally it sneaks out when I talk about the files. You have to go transfer those files. I get plenty of emails from you folks. What in the world are you saying? What is the crazy word you're trying to say there? What I'm talking normal. I don't know what y'all doing. This is the question that I have for performance-based questions. You could possibly get a matching question. For those of you I talked earlier about getting a command prompt question, you might even want to go back to last month's study group if you were not joining us on that one. Of course, all the replays are available on our YouTube channel. I did a really nice scenario performance-based question at the command prompt. And there were multiple commands we had to type in. We had to solve a problem by following a particular task. So I asked you to give me the commands for that. So that was a very good example, I thought, of giving you a story with command prompts and then you having to complete that story using all of those. We'll have to see what it is that you're able to know. We did pretty well with that too, I thought. A lot of you are already getting your answers put in. I'm trying not to look at the answers as they are coming through. Again, the scripting languages are the .py, the .vbs, the .bat, the .sh, and the .ps1. Now, if you've never worked with scripting languages before, the A+ certification does not expect you to know how to script, how to write your own scripts, but it may want you to understand what type of script you would use to perform a particular task. And that's what I tried to focus on here. There are certain script types that work well with certain tasks and other script types that would not. So that is an important one. If somebody says, I need you to perform this task, I should script that. What scripting language should I use? And that is something we don't even think about much in our industry until you are stuck in the middle of it, which is, well, I have to write a script. I have to build this out. The good part is once you learn one scripting language, they are all they're very similar to each other in logic and function. So it does work very well from that perspective. Let's see how you did with this one. The question asks, match the best choice of scripting language to the description. So let's start with the first one, which is a .py. A .py is a Python script. As many of you are familiar, I often tell you that if you are going to learn one or two scripting languages, if you really want to beef up your resume, if you really want to make yourself stand out for an employer or potential employer, learn a good scripting language. And two of the best would be Python. The other one I would recommend would be PowerShell. So you've got two options there. We'll talk about both of those in a moment, and we can talk about the others too. All scripting languages, though, are extremely useful, and you'll find some good use of those. PY, if we look at all those different descriptions that we were going to work through, that fits best with answer C. Rotate the log files on Windows, Mac OS, and Linux. Now, the reason that Python would be the best choice for this is that Python is a scripting language that will work across multiple operating systems. So you may not be able to do an exact match on all three of those, but most of that script is going to be identical, or you could even create a script that recognizes where it is and copies the files in the proper way. And then you could use the same code on all three of those operating systems. Boom, done. Now you've got one single script that works on Windows, it works on Mac OS, and it works on Linux. And it probably does different things on each one of those. Next on our list is the VBS. It's, since we're in the South, that's your Vacation Bible School is what that is. That's a Visual Basic scripting is what that is. Visual Basic scripting, it is being deprecated by Windows, by Microsoft in Windows, for the most part. So we don't see a lot of development work being done on enhancing Visual Basic for applications or Visual Basic scripting in the Windows operating system. This is a great way to manipulate what is happening in Windows. Has some functionality on the web side too, but primarily on the Windows operating system platform. So if you're working in Microsoft Word, Microsoft Excel, PowerPoint, or Microsoft Outlook, you're able to control what that application is doing and add additional functionality by writing your own Visual Basic scripts or VBS. And that certainly fits the best with modifying a Microsoft Outlook form based on user input. Next, we have a BAT, a B-A-T, with a baseball bat. That fits best with E, I think. E works very well for this one. A BAT file is short for a batch file, B-A-T-C-H. Batch files are the scripts that run at the command prompt of a Windows, or back in the day, a DOS computer. So anything at the Windows command prompt, you would like to have some way to automate that is very generic to the command prompt. That's copying a Windows document folder to a remote site every day would be a great task to automate. Fire up into a batch prompt and just copy some files, because that Copying files is a lot of what we do at a normal Windows command prompt. A batch file simply allows us to automate that. Next on our list is a similar type of script, but it's not for Windows. It's the .sh that stands for a shell script. Shell script is what we call that command prompt scripting language in the world of Linux. And there's many different kinds of shells that you might run. There's on your computer, you might be running one shell on one Linux system, a different kind of shell on another Linux system. These are very powerful prompts that allow you to automate a great deal of what happens to the Linux operating system. So if you're updating the web server certificate on a Linux server and you want that to be done automatically, that's a great type of scripting language to use, a shell script. I think the one that I use a scripting language to automate some of my web server certificate updates. I think the one I use is technically in Python, but since this one is specific to Linux, it can very, very easily be done just at a single shell script as well. And shell scripts will work on all the Linux flavors because the shell's available on any Linux that you're going to run, whereas Python may not be. You may have to install Python to be able to use that scripting language. And then lastly, PS1. PS1 is our PowerShell, which means it's a Windows administrative, highly flexible and powerful integrated scripting system for Windows. And that fits best with answer B, description B, automatically restart a Windows web service each hour. If you want to control the internals of Windows, if you want to start and stop services, if you want to manipulate what's happening in the registry, if you want to make very specific Windows administrative controls, PowerShell is exactly the scripting language you should be using. And as I mentioned, both PowerShell and Python would be two very good scripting languages. So if you're looking for something to do this weekend, grab one of those, start reading, start doing some testing, start writing some scripts. It is a skill set you will use throughout your IT career, and it will help differentiate you from really most people that are working in this industry. So many people working through all of those. The ID here is to find from these 5 different scripts, you were to find really the best fit for each one of those. That's why I said match the best choice. But there are certain scripts that are in this list that you could have used. For example, you could use Python to rotate log files on Windows. You could use Python. Well, we'll go back to this. We'll come back to that question in a moment. You could use Python to copy a Windows document folder. You could use Python to update a Windows web server certificate. You could use Python to automatically restart Windows, but it's a little bit of an overkill for all of those. There are better options from our list that would fit much better, and that's why we chose the ones we did here. So you can absolutely make an argument to me that says, I would have used a different scripting language to do that function. And you probably could have. Probably would have worked fine, but that wasn't the question. The question was match the best choice of scripting language to the description, which, by the way, is just not me being cantankerous or irritating, although I certainly can. The issue here is that this is the way that CompTIA might prompt you on the actual exam. Many of their questions do ask you for the best way to do something and give you answers that multiple answers could actually work, but only one of the answers is the best way. So you do need to understand what is best and what is worst so that you can then determine what the right answers would be. And this is a good example of doing something like that. Let's now switch back. Now that we've done our performance-based question of the week, congratulations to you that got those. Now let's change our direction and go back to a multiple choice question, one that you may have already seen before. The question asks, a Mac OS user has disabled Spotlight. Which of the following will no longer work? Would it be automated backups, location services, multiple desktops, file searching, or full disk encryption? We're just going to do it all day. A Mac OS user has disabled Spotlight. Which of the following will no longer work? Automated backups, location services, multiple desktops, file searching, and full disk encryption. See the difference? You see what I have to do with myself when I read through these? If you think you know the answer, please no answers in the chat room. You want to go to the link on your screen, go to professormesser.com/QA. Maybe I'm going a little too inside baseball there. It's all in my head. It's all me talking and having to figure out, I'm making a video. It's going to be stuck on YouTube and people will see it for years. Should I say file or should I say file? And I don't like either of them now that I'm thinking about it. Maybe I'll just avoid the word completely. The document. We need to, what will you document searching? Why didn't I do that? We'll have to work on that. These are the things I sit around and think about when the camera's not on. You're just getting a little piece of that right now. So let's see how much you know about Mac OS. You do have to know about Mac OS for this exam. You have to know about Windows. You have to know about Mac OS. You have to know about Linux and to some degree, iOS and Android. So there are 5 different operating systems we have to know about for this exam. No wonder it's so difficult to get through everything. That is the goal. That is the key. Maybe I'll just turn on the old way of talking and I'll just do the whole video just like being back home, down by the creek, down by the Walsissa River. That's what we'll do. No, we won't do that. I can't even do that anymore. I sound funny to myself. We'll have to figure out the best way that we're going to approach this file problem in the future. It's a problem that's not a problem. There's at least that's the level of issues we have to deal with. I'm fine with that. Thank you for locking in your answers. Again, you can always lock in those answers at the link on your screen, professormesser.com/QA. Let's see how you did with this one. How well do you know your Mac OS? The question asks, a Mac OS user has disabled Spotlight. Which of the following will no longer work? Automated backups, location services, multiple desktops, file searching, and full disk encryption. So let's stop our poll here. We'll click the button. There we go. And see what you chose. 76% of you say the answer is file searching. So that's a pretty strong number, I think. We might just go with that. 12% of you said location services. 8% said multiple desktops. 4% said automated backups. And only 1% said full disk encryption. You said the answer was file searching was what you were trying to do. Spotlight is the way that we search for things in the Mac OS operating system. So this is how we would look for a document, an email, a contact that we need to find, information that's in our calendar. It is a very flexible search because you just start typing things in and it starts filling in on the screen every possible thing that it could be based on what you are typing it in. So useful to have that. It's a magnifying glass in the upper right of your computer. You can also use Command Space, which is what I would normally use on my front end. For those of you that have seen this setup, I am using Mac OS here as my primary desktop. That's what's these two screens that are in front of me right here. And that is what I use when I am trying to find things on my system. And there have been times when Spotlight is no longer available. So I've had to think, what am I going to do now that Spotlight is not there? I want to be able to find this information. You can enable and disable all of those. There they are. If you don't want it to find information that's in your contacts, if you don't want it to find information that's in your files or folders, you'll find it there. Movies, mail, you've got a lot of options and a lot of customization that you can do, so that maybe there's certain things you never want to show up when you start looking through your system. You can turn it on and turn it off all from this view in Spotlight. And that's why in this case, 76% of you said file searching was the thing that you were hoping to really understand where the problems are, where the information is that you're looking for. It lets you Spotlight. Oh, I turned off Spotlight. Now I'm no longer going to be able to search for that particular document, file, folder, or anything else that's in my file system. Automated backups are commonly done in Mac OS using the time machine function. So if you notice that your automated backups are not working, it's probably related to time machine. Running time machine on my computer. When's the last time I backed this one up? On the 2nd. So I have a new NAS that I got in. We can talk about that. I installed 4 26 terabyte drives, 28 terabyte drives here yesterday. So we'll have to load that up and see how it works. Location services, if we disabled that, or we disabled Spotlight, it wouldn't disable location services. It tells our system and applications where we are physically in the world. So we're able to find that. We can see that mostly on our mobile devices, but it works great on our desktop computers as well. We have multiple desktops that's usually handled through a number of different services in macOS, but Spotlight is not associated with the multiple desktops that you would run in macOS. And then full disk encryption, that is certainly available in macOS, but it's not something that Spotlight handles. In this case, disabling Spotlight, the only thing that it would affect is the searching of files. That's what it would find or not find if you disabled Spotlight. So you did very well with that one. Spotlight is the answer that you were hoping, looking through, and Spotlight and file searching are the two things that are associated with each other. Let's do another one. We've got a question for you. More of a networking question. This question asks, a administrator, that's a good start, isn't it? An administrator has enabled SSID broadcasts on a network device. Which of the following would be the result? Would it be that switch interfaces are protected from loops, applications can change incoming firewall rules, the network name appears in a list of available connections, the device will always receive the same IP address, or unauthorized devices are required to authenticate? One of those would be the result of this. So let's go through the question again. It asks, an administrator has enabled SSID broadcasts on a network device. Which of the following would be the result? Switch interfaces are protected from loops. Applications can change incoming firewall rules. Network name appears in a list of available connections. The device will always receive the same IP address, or unauthorized devices are required to authenticate. If you think you know the right answer, please no answers in the chat room. Instead, go to professormesser.com/QA and lock in your answer. Should be pretty good for you to be able to see what the right answer might be. And I think some of you may have enabled or disabled this feature before. You might already know what this particular feature does, how it works, where you would be focusing. So see if you know as you go through this particular question. For those of you that have worked for it, may be an easy one. For those of you that have never worked with this configuration option, this may be something new for you. So we're about to find out. It's certainly part of your exam objectives, and you should know the answer. Be sure you input your version of the answer over at professormesser.com/QA. That will give you a chance to put in the correct answer for this particular question. This is one that I think if you get into the details of managing anything related to networking, this is where that management comes in. This is where that becomes a pretty important part, to be able to understand what you're changing when you click a button. Oh, let's click that button right there and see what the answer is, and see what it does. Probably not the best way. You should probably know what it's going to do before you click it. Let's see how you did on this one. The question again asks, an administrator has enabled SSID broadcasts on a network device. Which of the following would be the result? Switch interfaces are protected from loops. Applications can change incoming firewall rules. Network name appears in a list of available connections. The device will always receive the same IP address, or unauthorized devices are required to authenticate. Let's stop our poll. 90% of you say the network name appears in a list of all of available connections. Is this one where we just all chose one and we got it right or we got it wrong? We'll find out in a moment. Everything else mathematically is single digits. 6% of you say unauthorized devices are required to authenticate. 2% said switch interfaces are protected from loops. 1% said applications can change incoming firewall rules. And then 1% also says the device will always receive the same IP address. SSID management is an important thing to consider when you are installing or configuring an access point. So this is how users are able to see the network. An SSID is a service set identifier. Service set identifier is just a fancy name for the name of the wireless network. So that's why we're enabling, if we enable SSID broadcasts, it will send the name of that network out across the airwaves. And if you were to look at a packet capture of this, it sends it out many times a second. So you'll see these network names are always out there. And if you ever look at building the list of network names that are near you, you'll see all of those names start to populate. I was in a hotel recently and I brought up the network names. It was in a very big city and it went all the way down the page. It went farther than the size of the screen that I was using. There were probably 100 different SSIDs that I could see from where I was sitting in that city. It was a little bit crazy. I thought somebody needs to disable their SSID broadcasts to make this just a little bit more reasonable. But when you have that many people in such a very small place, it becomes a little bit challenging sometimes to find the right network name or the right SSID. So the network name appearing in a list of available connections, that is the right answer. No kidding. 90% of you got that one right. Of course, it's the right answer. Switch interface is protected from loops. 2% of you chose that one. That would be the spanning tree protocol, not SSID broadcasts. Applications can change incoming firewall rules. That is universal plug and play, or UPnP. That is not SSID broadcasts. The device will always receive the same IP address. That is DHCP reservations. I guess it could be static addressing as well. And then you have unauthorized devices are required to authenticate. That would be 802.1x. X for marking that particular spot. So in this case, not very difficult for you folks. You knew the answer indeed was network name appears in a list of available connections. That's absolutely the right answer. Well done on that one. Well, we've already talked about some troubleshooting tasks. We've gone through the process of understanding where we fit in the world of scripting languages. There's remote access information. We've got security on this exam. And if you go over the core one, you've got networking and hardware and cloud-based technologies. This is a big certification with 2 separate exams. So there is a lot of information that you need to know. My course is pretty big. It's 137 videos, over 19 hours of content. So when you work through all of this content, how do you keep all of it straight? And do you have time to go through every single video? Well, because of those challenges, I thought maybe we could make this a little bit easier and create a set of notes. Here they are, straight up. There we go, in the right direction. Those notes are designed and pulled directly from my videos. So they are available in this physical format. I also have a digital format. Here's the digital set of notes. We'll just flip through these real quick. You can see, by the way, that they are organized in the same format and the same structure as both the exam objectives and as the videos that I post and keep on my website index. That becomes pretty handy when you're trying to find the right piece of information, or you would simply like to follow along with the video and have your notes out in front of you. So that's where you would go to look at all of the text from the videos, all of the important graphics, all of the important images, anything that might be an important table, they are in here. So all your command lines are in this list. You get to see all the things that are important for your certification studies. So if you want a simple way for there to be a single place to go, we have our course notes. And if you're interested in the course notes, specifically, I know there's 2 of me there, but that's okay. These course notes are designed both to be a digital form and a physical form that I will print and send to you. This is a on-demand printing that we do from a fantastic printer. I mean, look at that. Nice glossy front end, perfect bound, which is that soft side binding on the books, color printing inside. And if you get the physical edition, That's what this one's called. You get the digital PDF for free. So you don't have to wait for the mail to show up with your printed version. You'll be able to download and start using the digital version immediately. We ship anywhere in the world. You'll see the pricing on that whenever you are in the checkout. So you'll see exactly what the options are for that. If you'd like to bundle these together, there's a little bit of a cost break, so you can get a bit of a discount. You can find all of that available on our website, professormesser.com/1102 notes. This is also a great way to help support what we are doing here. For those of you that have purchased this or you're considering it, thank you so much for the support of what we do. Let's do another question. Next on our list is this question that asks, after a failed attempt to install Linux on a separate partition of a Windows computer, this message now appears when booting. Quote, operating system not found. Which of the following would be the best way to resolve this issue? Would it be to run system restore, reinstall Windows, run startup repair, remove the Linux partition, or run SFC? Oh, there are 5 things here, and I don't know that any of these is what I would do first, but you may be in a situation, and this happens all the time, especially in large companies, where there are certain things you can do, but there are certain things you cannot do. And these are the 5 things that we could possibly do. After a failed attempt to install Linux on a separate partition of a Windows computer, this message now appears when booting. Operating system not found. Which of the following would be the best way to resolve this issue? Run system restore, reinstall Windows, run startup repair, remove the Linux partition, or run SFC. Now, I'm mentioning this question, of course, because this is on the exam objectives. This is something that I have pulled directly from the exam objectives so that you know. But this is also something I have done. I have been in this situation where I've tried to install Linux on a separate partition of a Windows computer. I have rebooted the system, and I personally have received the message when booting, operating system not found. And I had to fix it. What have I done? Now I can't get to my Windows partition. I can't boot Windows. I can't boot Linux. Nothing is happening. What do I do? And here we are. Now we have to answer this question. Let's see what you think the question was. This was, to be fair, before the years where virtualization was really a good option. So that's a very good choice now. Now I just start a new VM. I install whatever application there. I don't have to worry about any of this, which certainly helps when you're trying to install yet another operating system onto an existing computer and what we call dual boot or multi-boot that particular system. So you have to restart to get back to another operating system every time. So I wonder which one you will choose. Let's see which one 90% of you will choose to be able to do this. This should be pretty good to get a feel. Maybe some of you have even done this before. I can't be the only one that has messed this whole process up before. This was actually a question somebody brought up recently in our Discord, so I thought this will be a good one to be able to understand what's going on there. Now, as always, of course, if you think you know the answer, please no answers in the chat room. Instead, you want to go to the link that's right here on your screen, professormesser.com/QA, and answer that question. See how you do with that. I think a lot of you have had your chance to plug in what the answer is. So let's see if you know what this one is. The question is, after a failed attempt to install Linux on a separate partition of a Windows computer, this message now appears when booting. Operating system not found. Which of the following would be the best way to resolve this issue? Would it be run system restore, reinstall Windows, run startup repair, remove the Linux partition, or run SFC? So let's see. Oh, I can't wait. Let's see what you chose. Here we go. Close the poll. We'll click. Oh, we're a little bit torn on this one. But we do have 50%. We have a majority. And 50% of you say run startup repair. So if we went with the majority, that's the one we would choose. But we also have 17% of you that said, get rid of that Linux partition. Get rid of that. Your problems are solved. I don't think that's quite the case, though. 16% said run system restore. Just get Windows back to where it was. That's what system restore does, after all. We'll talk more about that in a moment. 9% said just reinstall Windows, as if that's the default answer for everything. I think it may be the default answer for almost everything. It certainly would fix a lot of things, but it's not always the best answer, is it? Reinstalling Windows can be time-consuming and can create problems just doing it. So not always the best answer. And of course, this question, of course, asks what the best way to resolve the issue is. See what I did there? And then lastly, run SFC. 8% of you said that's what you should run, is SFC, the system file checker. I have to do it. I'm now checking myself every time. So which one would we choose? If you were me, and if you were doing this the best way, then you would probably run startup repair. 50% of you chose that one. I think 50% of you were absolutely right. And you would run startup repair when you're trying to start your computer and it's not ever getting to the point where Windows is starting. So startup repair can be a valuable tool. It will check all of the little steps of the startup process to determine if they're working properly, and then it will make changes to fix any problems that it happens to find. The issue here, and the one that's important, is that we were seeing operating system not found. We're missing an operating system. It's not there. And the reason it's not there is because we tried to install Linux. The Linux tried to install its own boot manager over the Windows boot manager, but Linux didn't install properly. And now whenever you start the computer up, instead of Windows taking over, the newer boot manager you just installed try to take over. It's probably Grub or something similar if you're on a modern version of Linux. And so you have a completely different boot manager that shows up, or it may not even show up. And it just tells you, oh, can't find Linux. Linux isn't here. That's what it's really saying. It's not putting Linux on here. It's saying that the operating system that is currently configured to be the one that should boot based on your boot manager isn't found. And in this particular case, it's a fight where you have overwritten the good boot manager with a bad boot manager. If you want to think of it that way, neither one of them is good or bad. In fact, I've used Grub to boot Windows. It's something that can be easily done. But in this particular case, because we didn't install Linux, the boot manager that we installed now has nowhere to go. And here we are. We're at this odd point where we've sort of messed up the boot process of our computer. So because of that, we can run startup repair that goes through the process of understanding what steps should we be following. And it will get to the point where suddenly it's going to a different boot manager and it will say, something's wrong here. Let me put the Windows boot manager back on. Where's your Windows? I found a Windows here. Is this the one? Yep. Okay. We're going to use that one. And then you restart the computer and it works. So there you go. That is the answer that we were looking for. Also, if your system boots to safe mode, if you ever turn on your computer and suddenly it's in safe mode, it's not supposed to do that. There may be a problem with the boot process, and occasionally startup repair can resolve that as well. So that is for the 50% of you that said run startup repair. That would have fixed it. That would have been it. It is fast. It's simple. You don't even have to do very much. You just let it run. Occasionally, it will ask you a question. Is this the Windows you're running? Is this what you want to do? Is it okay if I change this? And you can tell it yes or no. And then it will finish it and you can reboot and you're done. So that's a very simple, non-destructive way with a minimum of configuration changes to resolve that particular issue. And that's why we would assume, or in this case, say that it is the best way to resolve this issue. We say assume because we haven't looked at the others yet. Let's look at these others. 17% of you said get rid of Linux. Just delete the entire partition, or delete what's in the partition, or delete the entire partition. Either way, though, the boot manager probably is not in that partition. It is probably not. So deleting the partition only deletes the Linux that you installed that wasn't installed properly to begin with. Good riddance, but it doesn't help us with our boot problem. We still have an operating system not found, and because of that, we still need to fix the boot manager issue. So that, in this particular case, is not going to help us at all. 16% of you said run system restore. System restore will take your Windows configuration back to a previous setup, but your Windows configuration doesn't include the boot manager. The boot manager starts Windows. So we can go back to a previous configuration of Windows, but it doesn't go back to a previous configuration of your boot manager. So that's not going to help us either. And of course, in this case, we have a different boot manager on our system. So changing things with Windows, we're not even looking at Windows anymore. We have to point it back to Windows to be able to get all of that working. So system restore is not going to help us either. 9% said reinstall Windows. This is one of those cases I told you that there may be multiple answers that technically could be correct, but do not correspond to being the best way to resolve the problem. That's a really good example of that, is that reinstalling Windows rewrites the boot manager to your system, but it also overwrites a bunch of Windows files. And that's not necessarily what you want to do. It certainly takes time and will absolutely overwrite important things unnecessarily. So instead of modifying your Windows config and overwriting a bunch of information and perhaps either maybe even changing or damaging something that's already there, that's probably not the best way to resolve this issue. Would it resolve the issue? Yeah, it would. It would fix it. But while you do it, it takes much longer, and you could ultimately be deleting someone's data. Neither one of those is great, especially that second part. And running SFC, the system file checker. This checks to see if your Windows files are the same version, the system files that are the same version that were originally installed on your computer, or at least are up to date with what is considered to be the proper system files for your operating system. SFC is fantastic if something goes in and corrupts one of those Windows OS files that get things running when you start your computer. But it's not going to change anything with your boot manager. That's your whole problem here, is the boot manager. So updating Windows, running an update, a Windows update, running a system restore, changing something in your registry, none of those things are going to work at all. None of those things are going to help you a bit. What you want to do is go right to your boot manager, and the best way to do that in this list of things is to run startup repair. And that's your answer. That's what we need to do. That is what 50% of you chose, and 50% of you got that one absolutely correct. Well done. I think I've got time for a couple more. We can fit 2 more in here. What? You wanted a printer question? Oh, I'm so glad you asked. Let's do a printer question, everybody. The printer question I have for you asks, a faulty laser printer toner cartridge has caused a large spill of toner inside the printer. Which of the following should be used during the cleanup process? It's technically not a printer question, but it sort of is a printer question. A bad question, too. This is not where you want to be. Do you use hot water, an air filter mask, a large brush, an air compressor, or a powder-based detergent? You got a few things to choose from there. Which one is it? Which one can we go? Some of you may have had to do this before. Some of you in the chat room are looking at this like, oh, I bet, yep, this could be one of those where we're dealing with. A faulty laser printer toner cartridge has caused a spill of toner inside the printer. Which of the following should be used during the cleanup process? Is it hot water, an air filter mask, a large brush, an air compressor, or a powder-based detergent? Which one is it? If you think you know the answer, as always, please know answers in the chat room. You want to follow the link on your screen, go to professormesser.com/QA and lock in your answer. And it is not the answer that Taylor says, which is just give up and buy a new printer. Actually, probably not a bad idea at that point. I think we can recover from this one, though. I have recovered from this one before. So this is one of those cases where at some point, the laws of statistics, the laws of large numbers apply here. And that if you have one of these situations where you've got 100 laser printers in your company and you're responsible for managing them, one of them is going to have this problem, and you're going to need to know what to do to be able to work through that. I think you'll know what to do. You'll be able to figure it out. Let's see. I think a number of you have already figured it out. Let's see if you got the answer right. The question again asks, a faulty laser printer toner cartridge, almost went all the way with the laser printer on that one, has caused a large spill of toner inside the printer. Which of the following should be used during the cleanup process? Is it hot water, air filter mask, large brush, air compressor, or a powder-based detergent? Which one is it? I can't wait to see what you want to do with this one. And no, it's not going to be the one where we get a new printer. Let's see. 49% of you say air filter mask is what you would use, but we have almost everything here is 2 digits. 24% of you say a powder-based detergent is what you would use. 15% say air compressor. 10% say large brush. And only 2%, we got here down to the 2% level, say hot water is what we would use. And interestingly enough, if you were going to clean this thing out, you would not want to use hot water. And I'll tell you why in a moment. That's the worst idea that you would have in this particular one. And I think if you were someone who was working through trying to figure out all the details of this, I think you should probably know these little tips and tricks. It's really going to help you with this one. First, this is not so much a printer question as a personal safety question, because safety with the equipment that we are using is an important consideration. These are electrical components. There's a significant security issue associated with that. There is, of course, concerns about working around batteries. That's another one that you might run into. And toner is an awful chemical. Toner is a really bad one because it becomes airborne. It gets into the air, and it is not good for you. You do not want to ingest toner. Not eat. Well, you don't want to eat toner, but you don't want to breathe the toner in either. And it's these tiny little toner particles floating through the air. Talk about microplastics. That is very much the microtoners. I guess we could say that. Because of that, if there's a lot of toner that you're working with here, obviously if the toner's in the cartridge, you're fine. But as soon as that toner gets out of the cartridge and starts floating around in the air and you have a lot of it, you need an air filter mask. You need to keep that toner from getting inside of you. That's the real challenge. So that's why in this particular case, of the 5 things I gave you, you needed to know which one of those 5 things was going to be the most important thing to know about. In fact, really only one of these applies. All of the other 4 answers, completely wrong. They're the thing you should not do when we're working with a large spill of toner inside of a printer. So let's go through them. For those of you that answered air filter mask, that was the right answer. Put on a filter mask. It's more than just protecting you against you sending out anything from yourself. You're also preventing things from coming into you. So air filter masks are very important if there's a lot of toner around. So make sure you are familiar with it. It's going to be important. Let's go through the others. 24% of you said a powder-based detergent. No, we would not use really any type of detergent inside of our printer unless it is a kind that has been specifically provided by the manufacturer. So, and powder-based is not what you would use inside of a printer anyway. Powder-based is one that is granules that you would get wet, and when you put it inside the printer, it is also granuled and it will dry with the... No, you don't want to use powder-based detergent. In fact, we tell you in our video, just use water. Just wipe it off with water, and specifically cold water. That goes back to the 2% up top that said hot water. You don't want to use hot water. You would think that you would. You would think hot water is exactly what you want to use, but the toner is designed to melt at a certain temperature. So by using hot water, you are effectively melting the toner that you're trying to wipe off. You're making it worse. Keep the water cold and keep the toner in its granular form, which still is going to be a mess, by the way. It's still going to be awful whenever you work with it. So keep it in that very fine fine type of dust form is what that toner is. When you send it through the printer, if you recall, one of the last steps of the printer process, if we go back to our core 1, that last step of the printer process takes and melts the toner granules onto the page and pushes them on there so that you are permanently affixing them to the paper. So you don't want to accidentally permanently affix your toner inside the printer itself. Bad idea. So don't use hot water. Don't use a powder-based detergent. You're adding more problems there with the detergent. You've already got a problem with the toner, by the way. And just so you know, you're not going to get all of it. There's no way you're getting all of that out. That's a real challenge, and being able to work through all of that. Also, the other two options on here, we have a 15% of you that said air compressor. Wow, that's going to be a mess. Once maybe you've put on your air filter mask, you've taken the printer outside into an area that you could, I guess, maybe control where the toner's going. It's probably not the best idea either. You don't want that toner going anywhere. You want it to stay in one place. Air compressor is a bad idea, just in general. Now, if you're trying just to clean out the printer, it's not a toner spill. You're just trying to get pieces of paper out of the toner, the little fine pieces of paper that tend to accumulate in the bottom of a printer. Okay, air compressor, we could take it outside and maybe blow it out with an air compressor. I would go along with that one, but not the toner. You should consider the toner as being a hazardous material, and you don't want it getting out into the atmosphere. You don't want it getting out into your environment. You don't want it getting into you. And then lastly, a large brush. Large brush inside of a laser printer. You're going to break something. All it's going to do is push the toner around. You're not scooping it up with a large brush. That doesn't help. So in this case, we want to be able to understand which of these individual things we would use during the cleanup process. And the only option here is 49% of you air filter mask. You got that one absolutely correct. That's the answer that we were looking for. That is the only correct answer in this list, the only one you should be using from this list. But obviously you might want to use cold water, really cold water and an air filter mask. And I think that's what you should be doing to clean out that particular printer with the toner that's gone everywhere. That's what you would use and work through it. So make sure you are familiar with safety. You are familiar with how you would determine what the best safety would be for a particular scenario. And you would know what documentation provides you with that information that you can then use. That's why this is a 220-1102 Core 2 question, because it deals with that particular area. Not really a printer question as much as it is a safety question, and that's where we came up with that one. Now, as you've probably seen, somebody said, could you use a vacuum? You could use a toner vacuum, which, by the way, is very unusual to find. Not everybody has a toner vacuum. It's a very special kind of vacuum. It's for printers. It's specifically made for toner. It will suck in the toner, but it has a very fine filter and will prevent the toner from coming back out, because the vacuum cleaner has air that goes in for the vacuum and air that goes out, because the air's got to go somewhere, and that's where it goes. So if you have one, yes, but as you can see here, was not one of the options. Not something you can do. And it's unlikely you have a toner vacuum unless company and you do this all the time. Maybe you work for a company that sells printers. You probably have a toner vacuum in that scenario. So that's the reason I didn't put that one on here. I just needed one answer. And the one answer here is the one you chose. 49% of you chose air filter mask. Now, as you've probably seen, there's a lot of questions we've already done today. And you'll notice the questions were very specific to the most current set of exam objectives. As I look at different questions that I've run into, not only on the internet, but I've looked at some commercial questions from other third parties, and I've noticed that the questions go off the scope of the exam. In some cases, the questions are just wrong, and the ones that I find on the internet are not the best quality. And I thought there's got to be a better way to do Q&A. It's such an important part of the training process, of the learning process, of preparing for our exams. How can we make these questions better? And I thought if we were able to create questions that had a same feel or style as the actual exam, and it stuck to the objectives, it was laser focused on just the information that was important for your exam, which shouldn't they all be this way? But they are not. So I thought we need to make our own. So we did. And we created a set of practice questions that are specifically designed for the 220-1102. This is our practice exams book. 380, this is the core 1, but the core 2 looks very similar in its size and scope. 380 questions, 390 question practice exams on here. Each one of those practice exams has 5 performance-based questions. So there are 15 performance-based questions in this book. And it's an interesting format that I chose, one that is very different than other Q&A books that I've ever seen before. Let's do one. I have as an excerpt, a page from my Core 2 Practice Exams book. This is page 15 of the book, question A41. We have an A exam, a B exam, and a C exam. The A41 says, again, no answers in the chat room. We're going to figure this out. It says, a system administrator is configuring a server to use 8 bootable partitions on a single SSD. Which of the following partition styles would be the best choice for this configuration? Would it be MBR, NTFS, DiskPart, or GPT? So now we get to choose. Now this is a PDF. If you're on a tablet, you can use your stylus. You can write on it and do different things on the actual screen. If you, I'm on this PDF reader in Mac OS, so I'm going to highlight different things that I think are important to me. I can put text on the screen. I can modify this. If I think I know the answer, I can choose it. There's a lot of different things that I can do with this. But the thing that you'll notice is that I need to know the answer. Once I've chosen what I think the answer is, there is a page called Quick Answer. You can go to page 33. Remember, we're on page 15. You can go to page 33, and that will absolutely take you to the A, B, C, or D. We'll tell you which one it is, but I need more information. So I want to go to the details, but the details are on page 77. I'm on page 15. Now, if you've ever worked with a PDF, you know, scrolling through a PDF and then scrolling back is not very fun. So I've created links inside the PDF, and if you put your mouse over the details or you simply click on the details on your tablet, it takes you to page 77. So boom, just like that. And you can see the questions at the top. System administrators configuring a server to use 8 bootable partitions on a single SSD. Which one is the best? And it says the answer is D, GPT. And it explains why the right answer is the best answer. Now, when I take these questions myself, I always get them wrong. And one of the things you will notice is that it will not, on many other Q&A platforms, it will not tell you why you got the question wrong. And I thought that was a pretty important thing if you're trying to understand the topic. How can you complete that circle of knowledge if you never explain why wrong answers are wrong? So in this case, and in every case in my books, every incorrect answer is explained why it is incorrect. So you will know if you get it wrong, why you got it wrong, and you'll understand why the right answer is right. I'll also tell you, if you've already gone through these books or you own them already and you get an answer right, don't just quickly pass it by and go to the next question, because practically every single answer in the book is also from the current exam objectives. And on your exam, you might not get a question about GPT. You might get a question about MBR. You might get a question about NTFS. You might get a question about DiskPart. So make sure you read through the wrong answers just so you are familiar with, yep, I knew that was wrong, and that's absolutely why I thought it was wrong. So verify in your mind all 4 of those. In a way, each question is providing you with 4 pieces of information you should know about this exam. So make sure you read through all of these. Now, if you've read through this and you're thinking, I don't even know what an MBR is, I don't know what a GPT is, I don't understand the question, I don't know what you're saying. Well, that's okay. At the very bottom of this list, I have a more information link with a QR code and a direct link that will take you to the video that was used to create this question. So if you're not familiar with the terminology that's being used, you can always go back to the primary video, watch through that video, then come back to the question. So you always have a way to validate the information that you're reading and to validate what you think the right answer is. Now, when we're done with this, if we'd like to go to the next question, we're on that other page. We went all the way to page 77. I don't want to scroll all the way back. Well, I'm in a PDF reader, and you may not even realize your PDF reader has a back button. Many of them do. We'll click the back button here, and we're back to where we started. And we can go to the next question that's on our list in the book. That is a set of my practice exams. So if you're someone who is looking for that last bit of study, for example, we always recommend you watch some videos. It's our WRAP formula. Watch videos, read a book, apply what you've learned with some labs, and then practice. Test yourself to see if you've really learned that information. WRAP, that's a great set of strategies and a way to help lead the way through the learning process. So not everybody needs all 4 of them, but I think that will give you the best chance of passing your exam. This is available on my website for both Core 1 and Core 2. You can find out more at professormesser.com/core2pe. How about something free? I like the free stuff. I've been talking all this time about the exam objectives. Those exam objectives are available for free to download from the CompTIA website. You can absolutely go out and get them. They are available at professormesser.com/objectives. There's a link that will take you over. Or you can go to your favorite search engine, type in CompTIA exam objectives. Will take you right to the page. So you'll be able to find those. It will tell you everything you need to know to pass this exam, which is probably one of the most common questions we get. How do I know if I'm ready? Well, what if you had a checklist that told you everything you needed to know for the exam? And that would be the exam objectives, is a huge checklist of everything that you need to know for this exam. There's a lot of bullets here, isn't there? There's a lot going on there, but that's a valuable tool. Make sure you grab those. Should be the first thing you grab when you start your studies. It should be the last thing you are referencing before you schedule your exam. Get them at professormesser.com/objectives. We do one of these study groups for A+ every month. I have scheduled 2 more for March. Come on back in March. We have one on March 11th and March 13th. That's the current schedule. These things tend to change sometimes. We try to lock it in, but sometimes life gets in the way and I have to move things around. The moment I move it, I make the change on this link, professormesser.com/calendar. You might be watching this video months later. And if you're wondering, when's the next live event going to be, because it's well past March, you can always go to the calendar. It will tell you. professormesser.com/calendar. Of course, we're not done with this month yet. If you're studying for Network Plus, we have a Network Plus study group next week. And Security Plus, we have a Security Plus study group the week after that. So lots more happening here in February, but I thought I'd give you a little sneak peek into what we have currently scheduled for March. Well, the first hour we have made it through. Can you believe that went pretty quick, I think. So we have more going on, though. Don't worry, we're not done yet. There's the after show where you can leave me a question that I will answer, almost any question that I will answer in the after show. Don't forget about the course notes and practice exams at professormesser.com/1102success. We also have our discounted vouchers. Why would you pay full price for vouchers when I've already got them discounted right here at professormesser.com/vouchers? And we also have ways that you could keep track of what we're doing here. Don't forget about joining our Discord at professormesser.com/discord. We also have our daily pop quiz questions on Twitter X, on YouTube, on Instagram, on LinkedIn, and other places. You can always find those at that appropriate website, professormesser.com/ the name of the site you would like to find us on. It's a great way to find that and make that happen. Thank you so much for joining us in this first hour. Stick around. Stay right where you are. We're going to take a 10-second break, and we will be back with our after show. Thank you so much for joining us. We will see you next time on the A+ study group. Okay, let's do more with the study group. I'm going to take a sip. One moment, please. we really need some type of outro or video to play or a thing, but I don't. So here we are. There we are in the after show. Just more buttons to push. That's all. It's time for the after show, everybody. This is the part of the show that is completely unplanned. We have not done any prep for it, which makes it one of my favorite shows, quite honestly, because it takes me a while to get things going there. Oh, and we are kind of deep into this, and I mentioned that I wanted to give you a super secret code word that you could use to earn a CEU. So let's do that before we go any further. To be able to earn that CEU, you want to go to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website and click the Contact Us link. When you click that Contact Us link, it will ask you for your name, your email address. In the subject line, please put February 2025 Core 2. And then in the body of the message, put the super secret code words of the month: hot water, air compressor. Those are your super secret code words of the month. Hot water, air compressor. I know there's a lot you have to remember, isn't there? You can add any other text you would like to that. I do read through all of these messages, but you don't have to. If that's all you want to do and that's all you need, hit the submit button. It will be sent to me. And then it takes me about a week or so to get through these and then finally get them out. I'll probably plan on doing that this weekend. So if you get it in today, hopefully you'll get this by the weekend time frame. So again, if you want to earn a 1-hour webinar category CEU that I email to you, you would earn that by going to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website, clicking Contact Us, and then in the body of the message, or the subject line of the message, put your, first put your name, your email address. The subject line is February 2025 Core 2, and the body of the message has the super secret code words, hot water, air compressor. That's what you would do. Continuing education units are used for renewal, so if you haven't earned your certification yet, you don't need to do any of those things. They won't help you a bit. But you'll get an email from me, so that's something. Who doesn't like to get emails? I don't know. Maybe that's something that can help. Maybe it isn't, but you at least have options, right? You got things you can do with this. It's now time, though, for the after show. The after show is the part of the show where I want to find out from you questions that you have for me. I've been asking you all the questions right now for the past hour. How about you ask me some questions? And you can do that by submitting questions for the second hour of the study group at any time. You simply go to professormesser.com/QA. There's a tab across the top, and you could submit those questions anytime. They are put into a queue, so they won't appear on the screen. You'll have no idea what's going on behind the scenes, but trust me, they're there, and I will read through them. We will find out the questions you might have, the things that you want to know about, and then I will maybe answer them. We'll find out in a moment. A number of you have already submitted questions, so we are going to start stepping through the information that we have and really breaking down the details. We got a few that we can go through. Let's go with more. Let's start with, there's a couple of questions that we got in that this sort of talks to. I'll sort of blend a couple of extra questions in with this one. This is from my good friend Anonymous. Anonymous sends a lot of information into us. So thanks, Anonymous. Good to hear from you again. The question is, how would you recommend studying Linux and Windows commands and their switches/options? There seems to be so many to remember. I don't think it seems that way. I think it is so many to remember. You are correct. And there were other questions we received that were along the lines of, whoa, there's a lot of stuff here. How could we possibly remember everything? Forget just the Linux and Windows commands. What about all the other stuff? How do you memorize all of these things? So there are a couple of things to consider and think about when it comes to studying, the study process, the memorization process, the idea of locking this information in and being able to retrieve it later for the exam. The first place you will need to go, we just talked about this, are the exam objectives. This is a valuable tool because it lists out everything you need to know about everything. Let's go start right at the top of this. You can see I've done some annotation here, so you can ignore the colors for the time being. This is from Domain 1.0, which is operating systems. You have section 1.1, which is identify basic features of Microsoft Windows editions. Now, on other certification bodies, that's all you get. But with CompTIA, they give you a bulleted breakdown of exactly what they want you to know. They want you to know Windows 10 editions, including Home, Pro, Pro for Workstations, and Enterprise, which is kind of interesting, isn't it? Because there must be, 15 or 20 Windows editions? You only need to know 4 of them. So that part's good. Then you need to understand the feature differences. What is the difference between domain access versus workgroup? What are the differences in desktop styles or user interface? What is the difference in availability of remote desktop protocol in all 4 of those editions? What is the difference in random access memory support limitations? What is the BitLocker? What about gpedit.msc? And what should we consider when it comes to, upgrade paths or in-place upgrades? These are important considerations. Let's bring up the screen into something that's not quite so crazy. There we go. So these are important things to keep in mind because we don't want to be in a position where we miss something, where we're studying outside the scope of what CompTIA wants us to do. This is really a focused effort into what we need to know. And for those of you going through this and using this as your checklist, not only is this what you need to know, it also, if it's not in this list, you don't need to know it. They're very good at staying very close to these objectives for the exam, almost perfectly to these objectives for the exam, to the point that I will tell you, if you memorize, you know, all of these different bullets, you can explain every single bullet to somebody else, and you go through the entire list all the way through section 4.9, which is for remote access, you're going to pass your exam. There's no way you can't pass this exam if you know every single one of the bullets in here. That also means you don't have to go off the scope of this. You don't have to go off script to be able to do this. Everything you know is right in front of you. This is the perfect checklist for your Core 1 and Core 2 exams and your Network Plus, Security Plus, or really any CompTIA exam. This is a luxury, by the way. Microsoft doesn't give you this. Amazon doesn't give you this. Cisco certainly doesn't give you this. Nobody else really goes into this level of detail. Very few. Maybe one other that I've seen out there. But this is a very good example of how you can break this down and study. So if you think this is too much, don't worry about all the other stuff. Focus on one thing at a time. Go down here into section 1, maybe even take the first section, Windows 10 editions, Home, Pro, Pro for Workstations, and Enterprise. Just step through all 4 of those. We need to know what those are, how you would use them, where you would use them, what are the differences broadly between all of them. And I say broadly because no specific differences are even listed here. So CompTIA is not looking for you to be able to give it a bits and bytes breakdown of the differences in the event manager in Home versus the event manager in Pro versus the difference in Pro for Workstation. Not looking for that. They're looking for overall, globally, broadly speaking, what are these 4 things and when would you use them? And in fact, if you watch my video, that's exactly what I give you. Now, some of that nuance is garnered by our experience in creating these through the years. So we created a course for the 600 series, the 700 series, the 800 series, the 900 series, the 1000 series, the 1100 series, and soon you'll see the 1200 series. So we've already gone through 6 iterations of the A+ training course. We create a new course every time. I don't recycle video. First, it's difficult to do actually, and it doesn't work as well as you might think it works. So I take every video that we do, everything you see on the screen is evaluated with every update. And often I'm changing things, I'm updating, I'm making things clearer. I mean, there's a lot there that we work through. So this is a really good example. I use this as my list. I have this entire spreadsheet. I have everything in this document I've taken and put into a spreadsheet, and that is my checklist for the video course. So if you're watching my video course, I've had people say, well, you don't include everything in the video course, do you? Like, oh yeah, I include every single bullet is in that video course because I'm checking it off as I go. As I am producing the video, as I sit here and shoot the video raw, I'm going through that list and I'm making sure at the end, did I cover everything? Yeah. Okay. We can go to the next video now. It's an important part of our production process. And so I want to be sure that you have a video course that is comprehensive. Everything is included that you need to know. We don't go off the topics. We don't go wandering down the road to give you information you don't know. It's very, very finely focused. It's a laser sharp focus on giving you exactly what you need to know to pass this exam. The argument I understand people will tell me is that, well, you need to know a lot more to work in the world of IT. Like, well, yes, and you will learn those things. But right now, we're working on this certification. So we're not giving you, here's everything you need to know in the world. We're giving you exactly what you need to know to complete this task that you have ahead of you. And I think it's a very good representation of that. Now, what about memorizing all of this? Here is, given the scenario, use the appropriate Microsoft command line tools. Look at all these tools. ipconfig, ping, hostname, netstat, nslookup, checkdisk, netuser, netuse, trait. There are just a bunch. So how you're supposed to remember all of this? If all you were doing was reading a book or watching a video, I would agree. It may be a bit more of a challenge if you do that. But I mentioned earlier our WRAP formula, WRAP, which is we watch a video, we read a book, we apply this knowledge with some practical labs, and then we test ourselves with some practice. There's the P in the WRAP. So I always tell people, definitely watch the videos because you can watch me perform the hostname command. You can watch me type in checkdisk and you can see what happens. You can watch me perform a trace route and what that looks like on the screen. That's part of it. And I think that helps with an overall understanding of the value of that particular utility. But it still hasn't quite sunk in, I don't think. It wouldn't for me. Okay, maybe we read about it. I'll read the documentation for that command. I'll read some information in a book that describes the command. Maybe it's able to provide a little more detail than what you could do in a video-based format. So now we've got a good combo. We've got a video that demonstrates, and then we've got a book that kind of fills in a lot of detail because books can pack a lot of information into a very small space because it's text-based. Then, when you really want to put it all together, you need to practice. You need to go through and apply that knowledge before you do anything. So get a lab. Try it yourself. Pop open a command prompt, run a ping command, run the ipconfig command, run a checkdisk command, run a nslookup command. And in fact, you can do the same commands I use in my video because I intentionally made them so that you could follow along with me. So even if you're not using a third-party formal lab application, we have those on our site. CompTIA makes an amazing set of labs. I have those available at a discounted price on my site, but maybe you don't have the available, that's not available to you, or maybe you'd like to do this yourself. Just follow along with the video. There's something about typing in these commands that starts to put everything together in my brain. I don't know whether it's firing it off the right synapses or it's sticking together all of the little pieces inside of that need to work together, but it's able to put together, here's what I'm seeing on the screen, here's what I'm reading in the book, and here's when I typed it in myself and made it happen. I created this out of thin air and I saw what happened on the screen. That's a very powerful study tool. So if in the process of doing this, if all you're doing is going through videos and you're wondering, why isn't this sticking? Maybe you need to do some other things. Maybe you need to bring in some other learning tasks that will help with the overall process. I think if you want the best possible chance of passing, you'll use all 4 of those different parts of the formula. You will watch a video. You will read a book. You will apply this with labs. You will practice with practice questions. If you do all 4 of those effectively in that order, I guess 1 and 2 you could probably switch around. You should do 1 and 2 first. You should do the third one third, which is the labs. And then lastly, always save your practice exams for last. Somebody in our Discord the other day said, I'm going to start with practice questions. And we said, no, don't do that. You don't know what you're reading. You don't understand the nuances of these questions. Like a lot of people were saying, that wasn't a printer question, but it had the word printer in it. Yeah, you have to read the whole thing. You have to think about the context. You have to understand what's being asked of you. Then you have to approach the actual question. So that's why practice exams are best kept to last, so that you have already a well-established perspective of what all of these things do and how they interoperate with each other. Because as you found in a lot of these videos and a lot of the practice questions, a lot of these technologies interact and overlap with each other, and they may be asked in a single question, and you have to bring together multiple parts of these objectives into that one single question. So I think that's where you should focus if you're trying to make this a little bit easier on yourself. You're trying to find ways to make the study process easier, to understand these commands better, to understand the malware removal process better, to try to understand the troubleshooting steps a little bit better. Doing them yourself can be a very powerful tool. I think doing it, you go to sleep, you wake up the next day, and you've already thought about what you did. It's already sort of baked in now to your brain. So if somebody mentions to you, oh, I heard you did traceroute yesterday. What did you do? Oh, let me explain to you what I did. It was pretty cool. And then you could say, here's what I did, and here's what happened, and here's what was going on behind the scenes. And if you can do that, you're now done with traceroute. Go to the next one. Now, is that time consuming? I guess it could be. But this process of studying for such a broad exam with so many different objectives, on average, takes 2 to 3 months for most people. This is not something where there's an easy button or you can simply get through it in 2 weeks. As much as the people on Reddit and YouTube will post their videos, which are just delightful to read. I studied for 2 weeks and passed my CompTIA exam. No, you didn't. You've been in the industry for 5 years, and then you went through the objective list. You didn't study for 2 weeks and pass the exam. You know, technically he's correct. You did study for 2 weeks, but you already knew a lot of this already. Most people are not in that position. So that's one of those situations where it's really more about technique than it is even your ability to memorize anything. You can memorize a lot of things. I bet you know a lot of songs. I bet you know a lot of song lyrics. Well, if you can memorize all those song lyrics, you can easily memorize the information you need for this exam. Very little of the Core 1 and Core 2 exam is rote memorization. So that's really a good example of spending the time to really understand what's happening under the surface, because if you understand that, it's very easy to understand what's on the top level. And that's what's going to be asked on this exam, is what's on the top level. Let's go to the next question on our list, which is not from Anonymous. Let me quickly bring up a separate piece of information, because many of you, I think, are in this situation where, let's bring up on the screen the question from Franklin, who asks, hello, Professor, any recommendations for us who don't have English as a primary language? Thanks in advance. Well, Franklin, I do have some recommendations for you. In the United States, of course, English is the primary language, but if you have the ability to take the exam in a different language, there are options available. CompTIA doesn't offer a lot of different languages for the CompTIA A+ exam. In fact, we should probably look at this real quick. I'm going to go into the CompTIA website, and let's just look at the CompTIA A+ page. Look, there's a new exam coming in the spring. I don't know why they wouldn't put a date there. They may not know what the date is. I don't know. I've not really talked to them lately. But if we scroll down to the details of the A+ exam, I guess I could have clicked down the top, but here we are. It does say that languages, this has English. It was available at launch in English. It's now available in these others in German, Japanese, Portuguese, Thai, Spanish, and French. Now, your language may not be any of those. You may have English as a second language, and you may not speak English as your first language or any of these others as your first language. So you're in the United States, you're going to be taking this exam in English, but English is not your first language. So what do you do in that scenario? What are the recommendations you can really do to be able to handle that? Well, fortunately, there are accommodations that CompTIA can make available to you. There's a set of testing policies that CompTIA has. If you go out to their website, they have the candidate testing policies. They have a number of accommodations they can make. If you have a disability, there's a process you can go through to gain additional time on your exam to cover that particular disability. And they have information here about what you can do. And as you can see, there is a very specific section on English as a second language accommodation. So if you're taking the exam in English in a non-English speaking country, and there's no localized exam available, you can get an English as a second language accommodation, which amounts to a 30-minute time extension. I'm tempted to go to a different country just so I can get that extra 30 minutes. That would be nice, except this is the problem you would run into. English, because all CompTIA exams are available in English, English as a second language, not available in English-speaking countries. So there's your sort of a disadvantage if you are in the United States. That's why I mentioned that at the very beginning. So make sure that that's the case. If you are registering for exams at Pearson VUE, this is nice, by the way, English as a second language is automatically granted to candidates in those eligible countries. So if you are in a country that doesn't have English as its primary language, and it's not one of the languages currently available for testing, they'll just give you the 30 minutes. You're going to need it. So here you go. Then you don't have to go through a process. They just do it, which is kind of nice. So they know that's going to be an issue. So they'll just cover you right out of the gate. You're good. No worries. They'll make sure you get the time you need. So there are a number of options there. In the United States, you clearly don't have that as an option, but you may want to discuss that with CompTIA, send a message to them. You can always open up a help message with CompTIA, help.comptia.org. Open up a ticket with them. If you're just not quite sure and you want some clarification, they're more than happy to provide that to you. Let's do some more questions. We've got some good ones here. I've got quite a bit to get through. A lot of great questions you folks are sending in. Thank you for doing that. If you would like to send in a question, use the link on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA to lock in that question. So let's talk about this newer exam. There were a couple of questions that came in about this newer exam. I say newer exam. You saw this earlier on the CompTIA website. I don't know who this guy is. He's so happy. He's getting his A+. He is working on it. Screen's over here, buddy. The thing at the top we were mentioning is this text right here. It says, coming spring 2025. It's the new collection. No, it's the new CompTIA certification 220-1201 and 220-1202. Now, this says that they're going to have the new A+ certifications being updated to ensure it remains relevant and comprehensive in today's rapidly evolving IT landscape. And that is what they do. This is a normal process they do every 3 years. They bring out an exam version. And as you saw earlier, the current versions of the A+ exam were brought out in April of 2022. So we count 3 years, that would be April 2025, which is probably somewhere close to where they're meaning. Now, in this particular announcement, the fact that CompTIA did not give us a specific date is kind of telling, because normally they are very specific with the new exam launches on this day. But I guess there's a lot going on there right now. They got a lot of things happening. So, and they don't tell me about the details of these exam dates either. I learned them from the website just like you do. So I'm hoping to get a little more clarity next week. There is an internal meeting that the partners are invited to. So I might be able to garner a bit more detail about dates on that particular announcement. But we don't have a date yet. So a lot of people are asking in the Q&A, should I wait for this new exam? And the answer that I always give is no, absolutely not. There are so many reasons why that's a bad idea. There's practically no good reasons why you would do that. And you may be thinking, well, why? Isn't newer better? Isn't that what you want? Is a newer exam? There's newer stuff on it. Here's the problem. Here's the issue. First, when an exam is first introduced, it's a new set of exam objectives. And because of that, some information was dropped from the old exam. Some information was added as new to the new exam. That amount of information dropped and that amount of information added, it very much depends on the exam, A+, Network+, Security+. In some cases, it just depends on what's changed in the last 3 years. And that's the critical part with this particular exam. We'll come back to that in a moment. The other thing I'll tell you is that when an exam is first released, because it is new and because all of these things have changed, every content provider of training materials has to update all of their training. That becomes important because you have to have materials that talk directly to the latest set of exam objectives. You don't want to be learning something you're not going to be tested on. So the process of publishing new content tends to take some time for everybody to get their new content out. Now, we're already working on ours. We're already shooting video. We're already editing video. We've already got stuff on YouTube you can't see yet. We're already doing this. There's already new things that are going to be added to our channel whenever that comes out. But that's only one provider of content. That's not every publisher. And certainly the old school book publishers, those take a little bit longer. I'm lucky. I can shoot a video and stick it on YouTube and you'll see it immediately. But old school book publishers, there's a publishing process. Somebody has to write it, then somebody has to edit it, and then somebody has to lay it out, and somebody has to add the graphics, and then we have to send it to the printer, and then it has to be distributed, and then it has to be shipped to you. There's a time this takes. It takes a number of months for all of these publishers to get everything out. So on day one, there will be relatively little available to choose from when you compare it to what's available right now. And the current exams as they are available right now will still be around until the end of the year. Told you, October, November timeframe is what I'm suspecting it's going to be. So if you are currently studying for your A+, or you're thinking of studying for your A+, study the version that's available to you right now. It is the one that have the most number of study materials available, the most number of people that have taken this exam and can give you hints and tips and tricks within the scope of their candidate agreement. You've got plenty of Q&A that you could go back through for. You've got 3 years worth of study groups that we've done for both Core 1 and Core 2. So there's a wealth of information that you can pull from that's already available. You should take advantage of that as much as you can before we hit that point in October or November. That's going to be very, very helpful. If I was doing this, that's what I would do. Now, obviously, once the spring 2025, whatever timeframe that is, that they release the new version, finally, we will be at a point where we could start evaluating what's available on the market. When do you think you should make that transition if you're starting the process? But if you're already studying, just keep studying. You have until October. Take the exam. Because, by the way, whether you pass the exam with the current set of exam objectives or you pass the exams with the newer set of exam objectives, the ultimate thing that you get is the same certification. There's no old A+ and new A+. You're just A+ certified. So why wouldn't you be A+ certified in the way that gives you the best possible chance of earning the certification? The other thing, and probably the one that I think is the best reason for not waiting is that the people that you are competing with for the next job that you want are already studying for their A+, and they're going to have it before you do. They're going to present it to a potential employer, and you're not going to have anything to present. So if you are in a competitive environment, which you are, I'm not sure you're aware of that, you are in a very competitive environment when you're trying to get that job. Wouldn't it be great if you could present an A+ credential, especially if somebody else is presenting one as well? So there you go. That I think is the important part of this, is you really want to have all of these important credentials that you can use to get a job or get a better job. And if you're waiting, then you're not getting the credential. I think that's probably the most important reason not to wait. So make sure you do that. Now, if you're ever in a scenario where you are trying to determine, should I do this, should I not do this, also go look at the exam objectives. I think what you'll notice is that the current set of exam objectives and the new set of exam objectives, which by the way have been released, those two sets are actually very similar to each other this time through. There were not a huge overhaul of changes in the newer exam. So if you think waiting is going to somehow allow you to study some new things that you never had available in the current version, turns out that's not the case. Why was that not the case? COVID. Wait, what? COVID, we're done with that. We aren't doing COVID anymore. We're out and about. We're back, somewhat back to normal, if that's what it is. But the problem was that when everything shut down, development work shut down as well on Windows. So you'll notice if you go back, I told you we've been doing these exams every iteration for the last 15 or so years. So you'll notice every time there's an update to A+, there's also an update to the version of Windows. So if you look at this version of the exam, the current version, the 1101 and 1102, the version of Windows available is Windows 10 and Windows 11. So the version of Windows that's going to be available in the new exam, Windows 11. Nothing changed. For the first time in forever, the update to A+ is not going to include an update to Windows. So all of the things that normally would be the difference in an old version and a new version are, oh, there's a new version of Windows. We got to learn the new operating system. There's some new features. There's a new information on requirements. There's new utilities we need to learn. We don't need to know any of that because there is not a new version of Windows. Doesn't exist. So the Windows 11 that you're learning now, turns out that's the same Windows 11 you're going to be learning in the new version of the exam. There's no difference. There's nothing. Now, of course, there are differences in the two versions. They are relatively minor. We are working on presenting or creating, as you've probably seen with previous versions of the A+, the Network Plus, Security Plus, I created this Venn diagram that I use to demonstrate how much of the information was dropped, how much of the information was added, and then how much information is the same so that we can get a feel for this. And these two Venn diagrams of these two are very close to each other. Used to be that there's a little like a 30 or 40, 50% overlap. There's a 50% overlap with the latest Security Plus. But on this one, it's very small, relatively speaking. So make sure you are familiar with those differences. It's not something you have to worry about right now, though. The important part is that you have an existing exam that you can work on. The existing exams are available until the end of this year, which gives you plenty of time to study and pass both of those exams. And let's say you started studying this and then life got in the way and you had to postpone things and you think, I don't want to have to start over. Well, as I've already told you, these two exams are so similar to each other, you're not going to start over. A huge amount of what you're learning is still going to apply. So that's what I think your best bet is right now. Don't take your foot off the accelerator. Keep going, keep going, keep going. Never, never, never wait to get certified. There is no good reason and plenty of bad ones So absolutely go through that process of evaluating it, see if what I'm saying is true, see if the differences, if you were to look at both of them, is really the same. I think you'll find both of them are remarkably the same. And that's why I think if you are, you're in that place where you're trying to make a decision, I think you should focus on what we are doing with the current and available version of the A+ exam. Let's take this question. I love a good fight about operating systems, which is to say I hate people fighting about operating systems. So let's fight about it. From Douglas, who writes in, Professor, why do you use Mac OS instead of Windows or Linux? Feeling a little attacked, Douglas. Is it for functionality? Use of certain software programs? I noticed that you have an iPhone, a dastardly iPhone. In the last live, I put my phone up to the screen, and I guess people saw that big, ugly block that's on the back of the iPhone. Indeed, it is an iPhone. You've got a lot there that can go through. When I'm working with the iPhones, I just use an iPhone because that's what I've used. In fact, early on, I did try to use an Android phone, and it would just keep rebooting on me every time I was in the middle of a phone call. So I used my phone a lot at that time in my life, and I couldn't tolerate a phone that would just reboot every time I used it. They're better now. They're much better now. But back when they were first released, not so great. And so I stayed on BlackBerry for a long time because of that. I was hurt bad by the Android. And then eventually moved over on the iPhone. Now, while I was on the iPhone, I was still using Windows. Windows was my main driver, my daily driver. So for those of you that have seen the view from the bird cam, this box in front of me is Mac OS. I have a secondary monitor for Mac OS that I also use for this. Those are the two main screens that I usually use during the day. So Mac OS is my primary desktop. However, we've got plenty of Windows systems that we use here. So we use Windows for a lot of different purposes because every operating system is good. Sorry people that wanted to fight about what was the best thing and what was not the best thing. All operating systems are good because I use all of them. If you go to professormesser.com, you've hit a number of Linux servers along the way, including the web server itself, the database server I use, the caching servers I use, the load balancer I use, the reverse proxy I use. All that's Linux. So if you're touching us on the internet side, if you're hitting our sites from there, you've hit a Linux server. So I'm the Linux administrator of that server. So it's something I spend a lot of time using and a lot of time working on. So Linux is an important part of what we do here. So I can't say that I don't use one over the other. I use one because it's the right one to use for that purpose. Now, from my perspective, the reason that Mac OS is my desktop that I use, my daily desktop, is because I was using Windows for everything, for my video editing, for the website maintenance, for SSHing in and doing everything. It was my main desktop. But Microsoft had this thing, I don't know if they really still do. I think they still do to a degree, but because I don't normally run Windows as my primary desktop, I'm not sure. But I had at the time, I would need to start a video render and have it run overnight. So while I was sleeping, video was rendering on my Windows machine. And it would normally take 6 to 8 hours to render the pack of videos that I needed to render. So I would normally edit during the day. And at that time, because of the CPU technologies we were using, rendering took some time. So I would queue them up, hit a button, and go to sleep. Come back in the next day, the renders were done. I could continue with my day. You would get new videos. I would get the videos out to YouTube. I could continue with the process, and the flow would be perfect. Except Microsoft didn't like it that I was controlling the machine, that I was telling it what I wanted it to do at night. Because Microsoft wanted the computer to do other things at night. They wanted the computer to reboot. They wanted the computer to load new versions of things. And I told the computer, no, I'm rendering at night. Let me turn off auto update. Let me turn off the automatic reboot. Turn it off, turn it off, turn it off. Oh, thankfully, don't have to worry about that. So I would set it up to render. I would go to sleep. I would come back to the studio in the morning and the computer had rebooted. Well, that seems weird because I told Windows not to reboot. And I looked at the configuration and the configuration said, we will not reboot on you because you are in control of this operating system. Of course, we will not reboot, except we totally will when we want to. It turns out Microsoft did not exactly follow the configuration parameters you had set up. But no, they said you could change a registry setting and then it really, really won't reboot. Like, okay, I'll change the registry setting, set it up, it's rendering, go to sleep, come back, it had rebooted. So digging into it more, they go, oh yeah, well, there are times when the Windows operating system will ignore that registry setting and it will reboot, at which time it got the boot. So at a certain point, you can only tolerate so much of this. And I thought, I need to render. I need to get work done, and I can't get work done if the operating system is getting in the way. So that's why Windows did not quite make it on this desktop. Now, for those of you that are familiar, I have other computers that I use in my home for doing other things. I have a gaming system on television. Sometimes at night, I'll get an hour, maybe two, where I can go up and relax. Instead of sitting up, working on my desk, I can sit back on the couch and I can play games and get the wireless keyboard, the wireless mouse. I can get online, and I've got a Windows computer because it does games really, really well. I can do other things on there as well. It's a great machine that does that. But that's a Windows operating system. So I got Windows 11 Pro up there. I've got my Mac OS running here. And the world is great. That just happens to be the mix for me. For you, Windows might be great as your daily driver. Rock on. Do it. Use that. It's a great operating system. Go use it as your daily operating system. Maybe you like Linux. Maybe there's parts of Linux and the customization of Linux and working right there in the core of the operating system. That is something you like to have available and you like to work with, and you like the style of it, and you like the flexibility. Go use Linux. I don't care. If you're wanting to engage me in a fight about operating systems, it's the worst fight ever. It's me going, yeah, that sounds good. Oh, you want to use Mac? All right. Oh, you want to use Windows? I like Windows. Do you like Linux? Me too. It's the worst conversation ever because I just love doing all of that. But if you want to do video editing, for me, the flow works best with Mac OS. If you want to do gaming, for me, it works best on a Windows workstation. If you want to manage a worldwide website with databases and web pages and a lot of fancy networking things, for me, Linux was the right solution. Now, that might change in the future. We might do something different. We might use a different operating system for this. We might do a different operating system for that. That might be the case going forward, but that just happens to be where we are now. So that is the reason that's a very long reason why Mac OS is the one that's on the front and why all of the others are doing something else. But I think that's a pretty good overview of things you should know about and why we use a particular operating system for one other thing. I think we might have time for one quick short one to finish up. So, by the way, there were a lot of you that asked questions of me in this list that said, how could I best study for these particular topics? And then you listed out a bunch of topics that are no longer in the exam. So again, I know I've said this a million times. It is so important. Always go to the exam objectives. Use the exam objectives as your checklist. If it's not in the exam objectives, you don't need to know it for your exam. So what you will find is that a lot of other study materials will not update themselves between versions, or they'll leave in the old stuff that has subsequently been removed from the exam objectives completely. And it gets people confused, and they'll tell me, your videos are not comprehensive because they didn't include these topics. I have to write them back and go, yeah, but those topics aren't in the exam objectives anymore. CompTIA specifically removed them from the objectives. I think we can all infer from that they specifically removed them for a reason. So I'm not going to teach you things just randomly out of the world of things that aren't on that list. I could spend my entire life doing that. Stick to the list. You stick to the list, you will be successful. Well, let's keep going through this list. I know I said one more quick question. That was sort of one more quick question, but we can fit one more in here, right? We'll get to another one here. And I think hopefully you've understood now why there is a difference between this expectation of CompTIA saying new exams are coming out in the spring, and I keep telling you, you've got until October. Hopefully you now understand the difference between all of those. I got a few questions about that one as well. Let's keep going around this. That also means, by the way, those of you that ask, how do I handle this transition? There's not a transition. There's no new exam. Does not exist yet. Until it exists, there's really no conversation to have because we don't know what's in that exam for sure yet. We don't know what the dates really are yet. So it's hard to make a determination. If you don't know when it's happening, it's hard to tell you when you should be making a change. Let's wait for the new exams to come out in the spring, whenever that is, and then we'll worry about the details then. And then we'll have plenty of talk about. Trust me, I will tell you everything I think about that particular piece. On average, takes about 2 to 3 months to pass each exam. That still gives you plenty of time to finish both of those, and that's why I mentioned that. For those of you wondering, there will be a new course. I always shoot new videos all the way through. I think I mentioned that earlier. So I always have a new set of training videos every time there's a new course. Some of the information in those training videos is very similar to the information in the previous training videos because a lot of the information carries over. But I always update it. I always put a different perspective on it because you give me feedback during those 3 years. And so I know where to emphasize and perhaps in some cases de-emphasize information that I'm putting into the new videos. I think they get better every single time. So I think it's not a waste to do that. I think it's a good thing that I'm producing new videos every time. It's actually, it's sort of like, it's if you've ever had to do any type of updates to a home, and a lot of people say you just raise the house, you clean it out, you gut the house, and then you fix it from the inside. You take off all the walls, you take out all of the thing, you leave the plumbing and the electrical and the walls, and then you fix it, which is, by the way, the best way to do it because it's the less expensive, it's the most flexible, you can really design exactly what you want. It's probably a bit more expensive though. Probably is not expensive now that I'm thinking about it because I have done refurbs on my house. It's a mess, it's expensive, it's difficult to manage. It's sort of a pain in general to have to deal with. And that's the reason I create new videos every time. If you try to go back and you just cut out of a single video what is still there and then you add on things that have been changed, by the time you've gone through that whole process, you could have just shot a new video, which turns out that's exactly the way it works. Next on our list, a lot of good stuff here. For those of you, and this is an important consideration, we've talked a little bit about why you shouldn't wait, but we haven't talked about what if you're stuck in the middle. And Liam really approaches this problem and says, since I passed the 1101, will I have to take the 1102 before the update to get my A+? With the release of 1201 and 1202, will I have to retake the Core 1, which means I have to spend an extra $200. The two exams that you have to pass to earn your A+ certification must come from the same edition or version. So if you have passed your 1101, you must pass the 1102 to be A+ certified. You cannot pass the 1202. You must pass the two that match from the same edition. That's an important consideration. Now, the part that I'll remind you about is even though there may be updates for the 1201 and 1202 that are released in the spring, The existing 1101 and 1102 will still be around until the October-November timeframe. So if you are studying, you've already passed your 1101, you have to pass your 1102 before October. Let's say October's the retirement date for that version. So you have until October. That's plenty of time to study for your Core 2 exam. Now, let's say that you have passed your 1101. Maybe you passed your 1101 years ago. But now life got in the way. You're not able to complete your 1102 before October. You are now in December of this year. The 1100 series exams have been retired. You can't take them anymore. If that's the case, you have to now start over with the 1201 and 1202, which means you will be spending an extra $200 to take the 1201, which is kind of sad because, as I mentioned, the 1201, those objectives, very similar to the 1101. It's almost like taking the same exam again in many ways. So I don't want to see that happen to anybody. So make sure you know about the timings of this. And I will put up, I have a document that I'm creating that has a complete timeline. You will have a exact view of when and where these different versions start and stop. So you'll be able to make that decision. And I have a breakdown of exactly what is different between all of these, not just visually, but I break down the details. There's so little that is different between those two. I could almost list out every individual little detail and still it would look like a summary. That's how little has changed between these two versions. So that's why it is important that you take from the same editions, but make sure that you keep in mind that the 1102 and the 1101 are still able to take until the end of this year, till the fourth quarter of this year, we'll say, fourth calendar quarter. So the October, November, I don't think December timeframe, it probably won't go that far, but maybe September, October, November. Somewhere in there, I'm guessing that's when the retirement will be. I might be wrong. We'll find out. Hopefully, I'll get more information this week or next on when those dates will really be. Maybe CompTIA will provide us with a little more insight, because I do have access to a few things internally at CompTIA where they might be able to give me more information on dates and that type of thing. But so far, they've not really locked it down. So there's not much I can tell you other than what I guess it will be, what I think it will be, what I suspect they will do with this. But right now, we're not quite sure, but we're pretty sure it's somewhere around that time frame. And I think that's a pretty good bet at this point. We've been pretty good with predicting what those will be based on past experience, and I don't see it changing at all going forward. CompTIA has stayed very much on the same pathway that they have always stayed. We'll have to see what they finally come up with, but I suspect when we get the actual dates, we're going to be pretty close to what they had for us. Well, I think that brings us to a good spot to finish up this month's Core 2 study group. I want to thank everyone for joining us in that first hour where we did a lot of Q&A, and perhaps even more so here in the second hour where you've given me some more questions to talk about and things that we can discuss about the Core 1 and Core 2 A+ exams. Of course, we do one of these study groups every month. If you are watching this on a replay, please go to our calendar and find out when the next live event is going to be. That's at professormesser.com/calendar. Thank you also so much for joining us. Thank you in the chat room. If you do watch this on our YouTube channel or on our website, we'd love it if you give it a thumbs up. And if you haven't subscribed to our YouTube channel, you might want to consider doing that as well. As I've already mentioned, I've already got A+ videos that you can't see on my channel. And eventually, I will start putting them out publicly. So the only way you'll know when they're released is by joining us and subscribing to our YouTube channel. I want to thank everybody for being here. Thank you for joining us. We love doing these with you. We will see you next time on our A+ study group. Thanks, everybody.